New Jersey played no small part in the effort to rid this great land of powdered wigs and tea, and as such was the host to over 600 battles, skirmishes, and other acts of the American Revolution. Now, even though the good guys won, as they always seem to do, that is not to say that there was anything approaching consensus on this topic even then. Neighbor was often pitted against neighbor, as rebels and loyalists engaged in all manner of spats, feuds, and altercations on behalf of their respective parties. Boy, I'm sure glad we moved past that. Today's story covers mysterious deaths, the perils of waterfront property, and, dare I say it, contact with the beyond. Allegedly. The White Hill Mansion of Fieldsboro, New Jersey. Welcome to Words and Coffee, where we talk interesting history about the Garden State and showcase a bag of small batch roasted goodness. Today's brew is Swamp Fox by Stocking Mill Coffee. And the history is the White Hill Mansion of Fieldsboro, New Jersey, the mysterious drowning of its second owner, and subsequent hauntings. Let's get to it. Meet Robert Field Jr., a West Jersey landowner with a nice place along the Delaware River about 25 miles northeast of Philadelphia. Inherited from his father of the same name around 1757. By then, the house had already been on its perch overlooking the river for about 30 years. Fast forward to 1775. Robert was doing all right. He had a wife, 3 kids, some acreage, and was a successful merchant. Not a bad deal, right? He was even a genuine patriot. This included publicly throwing his support behind the new continental government in writing. If you're not picking up what I'm putting down, during the lead-up to the American Revolution, Robert put his name out there as a friend of the Revolution and had waterfront access to the Delaware River. For now, let's talk about White Hill, the house. In addition to being a sturdy brick residence, it was also a tavern. Perfect for meeting to discuss how to harass the Brits after a few pints. It also featured a large basement with a tunnel leading out to the river. Ideal for discreet movement of people and articles. In other words, it became a vital caching point for moving guns and butter to various patriot groups. Unfortunately, Robert would not live to see the signing of the Declaration of Independence. In January of 1775, he had a little mishap on the river, next to which he had spent literally his entire life, and drowned. Just like, fell out of his canoe and forgot how to swim. Apparently. Even at the time, people thought this was just a little sus, but there was nothing for it. Chalk it up to malfeasance, an accident, or the Jersey Devil, the end was the same. Management of White Hill fell to his wife, Mary Peel, who, frankly, had a hell of a time. Of her 7 children, only 3 survived to adulthood, and by 1776, when her toddler Molly was deathly ill, she was swept up in the Revolution in a major way. This is a part that often gets glossed over in the textbooks, but the Bill of Rights is in fact written in order of importance. The First and Second Amendments are well-trod ground, but the third was fully relevant at the time it was written. That is, quartering of troops. So about that whole waterfront property thing. First, Continental Navy, fleeing the Brits, stopped at her house and liberated supplies from the basement. At the time, Mary was suffering from a pretty serious cold and just didn't have the energy to really challenge them on it. Yeah, whatever, take it. I'm just going to go have some Dayquil and lie down. Her neighbors, jealous little bootlickers that they were, thought they could curry some favor with the cops by pointing out that Mary had been harboring rebels. She denied this, which seemed to have been accepted by the cavalry captain that questioned her, but she was still compelled to house a company of Hessian mercs. However, this turned out to be a blessing in disguise, since Captain August von Redden of the First Jäger Company, let's be honest, some of the old-time titles are pretty boss. He protected Mary from a lot of the plundering suffered by her neighbors, many of them the aforementioned bootlickers. I'm sure there's a lesson in there for would-be snitches. This lasted for several months until Christmas morning, the morning that the original George W. crossed a frozen river to ice a bunch of Germans still hungover from Christmas Eve. You know, basically turning the tide of the war. Well, Trenton was only 6 miles from White Hill, and they cleared out real fast. And after that, things mostly quieted down. The tavern at White Hill did a steady business with travelers on the river, and in 1779, Mary would hide Commodore John Barry from the Brits. For those of you familiar with the Battle of Turtle Gut Inlet, Barry is the guy that lit a fuse to a brigantine-sized firecracker. After the war, Mary would remarry Commodore Thomas Reed, and White Hill would continue to prosper. Two of her children would also marry into the well-off Stockton family. When she died in 1816, ownership of White Hill would transfer to her son, yet another Robert. Thus, an old house with history and no shortage of death within its walls, the scene is now properly set for ghost stories. This is where things get spooky. No. Alright, forget it. I'm not doing the bit. That's way too annoying. So, while White Hill changed hands a number of times over the years, at one point the name changed to Fieldsboro, in honor of the Fields family. During another stint, it allegedly served as a bordello. Again, allegedly. I couldn't find much on that particular anecdote, aside from, people trying to one-up each other online. So, grain of salt time. One of the, again, alleged ghost sightings was a woman supposedly held against her will in the attic. Like I said, a lot of embellishing and one-upping, so I don't know. However, it did serve as a speakeasy. In 1923, White Hill was once again invaded by Germans. Heinrich and Katrina Glenk bought Fieldsboro and turned it into a high-end restaurant, and put the smuggling tunnels to use once more. Only this time, instead of guns and butter, they were smuggling bathtub gin. It was during this time that employees and customers started to report strange sightings. Some claimed to have seen a featureless man wandering the hallways, others reported a voice upstairs, but get this, no one was there. Ooh. So take that as you will. For my part, I am much more interested in a former Revolutionary War tavern, once again dodging a different sort of king's men 150 years later, and still coming out on top. And to top it all off, this story has a rarity among rarities when it comes to historical sites in New Jersey, a happy ending. In the late 90s, developers attempted to purchase the land and turn it into condos or some shit. And the local government, dare I say it, actually did something I agree with.
No way!
I just threw up in my mouth a little bit. They said, no way, this is a historical landmark, and thankfully, eminent domain the shit out of it. Which is, maybe the second time I've ever said those words together. Ever. Yes, in a state with a normally atrocious track record when it comes to historical preservation, New Jersey did right in Fieldsboro, and the house remains there to this day. Maintained by the Friends of White Hill Mansion, who operate tours and ghost hunting parties. That's all I'll say about that. From eponymous beginnings to bearing witness to major historical events of history to a success story of preservation, the mansion will hopefully remain atop its riverfront perch for generations yet to come. That'll about do it for me. If you stuck with me this far, thank you so much for watching. Sources in the description as usual. This has been Words and Coffee. Until next time. After the war, Mary would marry? What? After the war, Mary would marry... Who wrote this?